It's Pat the Flip, back with another reading video. Today's topic is, how do I use training mode? And I'll be reading while playing Ruiner. If you like this, please drop by patreon.com/pattheflip to check out the rest of my work, ask me questions, and help me pay my bills. Thanks for listening. Hi Pat. I've been playing fighting games for a couple years, but recently switched to Rev 2 as my main game. It's been about 7 months, and I'm starting to get discouraged by my progress, and I think one of my big problems is I have no idea how to use training mode to solve problems. I try to do what people tell me to do, with recordings and drills and experimenting with different answers to things I'm struggling with, but it never really transfers much to matches. I have severe ADHD I'm currently treating, but growing up with ADHD, I never learned how to study at anything, and I've gotten to the point in my fighting game journey where it's almost required for me to do so. I go into training mode with the intention of using it for things besides grinding combos and block strings, but I just can't really seem to figure out a tangible way to do so, and all of the things people suggest to me just don't seem to work. I want to be able to practice things like drilling fuzzy blocking against pressure that constantly messes me up, figure out setups for Jacko with minions that I can convert off of, figure out what options my character has to beat other characters' neutral options that I struggle against, find ways to improve my pressure and cover defensive options the other player has, but it's so hard for me to theory craft these things and sometimes even figure out how to set up the recording to actually facilitate it. I feel like I have zero concept of how to study and problem solve, and it really shows when I try to do any of this. If I do find a solution for a problem, I always think this is bad and someone else could find a better way. Why am I even doing this? So my question is, how do I figure out my own way of using training mode? I know this is a pretty broad question, but I know you'll have some valuable insight on it. Sincerely, Lost in the Lab. This question is so good that it prompted me to look through the archives to see what I've written about using training mode, and what I discovered was that while I sing the virtues of training mode quite often, I haven't actually written that much about how to use it. It sounds like you're already comfortable using training mode for its most basic function, which is simply learning how to do your character's stuff. This is good. When you're learning a complicated set of motor skills, like playing a Guilty Gear character, you need a space where you don't have someone else trying to beat your ass at first. But, as you've noted, there's a lot more to training mode than simply figuring out how to do your character stuff against an inactive opponent. So, let's talk about what training mode is good for. Fighting games test you on a lot of things, and we can roughly group those things into looking at the screen, recognizing the game state, making a good decision, and executing on that decision. If you want more on that framework, you can look up my previous essay on OODA loops to dig more into how you can use that framework to understand what's going on at a more granular level. Of course, this framework is not unique to fighting games. Poker also tests your ability to do all these things. However, since poker is a turn-based card game and doesn't have a few dozen cool characters doing wild shit all the time, the observe and act phases are mostly a matter of learning the rules of the game, and the orient and decide parts are where the meat of the game is. A game of sufficiently high complexity, like Guilty Gear Xrd Rev 2, is going to have a lot of potential game states. Like, a lot. A game like Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo has enough game states to keep the game interesting for literal decades, but Rev 2 has exponentially more than that because the characters can do a lot more stuff, and the core game has more systems, and the movement is fairly versatile, and the screen is pretty big. If I'm playing Super Turbo against someone, it's very likely that I'll see the same situation happen multiple times during a set, but in Rev 2, it's entirely possible that the only repeat situation is at Duel 1 Heaven or Hell Let's Rock. High-level play in most fighting games these days typically assumes that both players have a roughly equivalent knowledge of all game states. And for games with less complicated characters and systems, like Street Fighter or Strive, that's generally a fair assumption, in the same way that we can safely assume anyone playing at the World Series of Poker knows all the rules of the game, the number of cards in a deck, and so on. But in more complicated games, like an Xrd or a Tekken or a Marvel vs. Capcom, a player's game knowledge can be a competitive differentiator for a very long time in the game's competitive life cycle. If I can put you into a lot of situations where I know the right answer and you don't, I'll probably win before you figure out the right answer to any of them. If the knowledge gap between you and I is big enough, I can beat you just by running you through a couple years worth of knowledge checks, without ever having to personally think too hard about how to play against you. And if the only time you run into those knowledge checks is when you play against me in bracket, then it'll take a long time before you get enough experience under your belt to be able to play effectively in those situations. This is where training mode comes in. With enough practice and familiarity, you could recreate just about any situation in the game, figure out what your various options are to win that situation, and be ready to take on all comers. Well, kind of. You could theoretically use training mode to lab every single possible situation in the game, but it wouldn't happen before you died of old age. There's just too much stuff in there to lab every single situation. Perhaps more importantly though, I think it'd be boring as hell. Fighting games are best enjoyed with other people, and if you're forever living in the lab, you're going to be missing out on mashing with everyone else. So what you need is a search strategy, or in other words, something to help you prioritize which situations to lab. You could spend an hour finding the perfect solution to defending against another Jacko swarming your shit in the corner with 3 maxed houses and a bunch of homies. But if no one in your locals plays Jacko, the likelihood that you'll be able to directly realize those gains in your next tournament run will be low. That doesn't mean you won't benefit from labbing random shit indirectly. It can still be good for working out problem-solving skills and building your familiarity with a game, but it's probably not the most efficient use of your time. Fortunately, there's an easy search strategy to help solve this. Lab whatever killed you most recently, either in the last set you played or the last bracket you entered. If there were buttons that you got hit by because you didn't know how to beat them, choose that character as your training mode dummy, press the record button to switch control over to the dummy character, then press it again to start the recording buffer. Once it starts, just record the character jumping up, then pressing the button when they land, and test out which of your buttons win or lose at different ranges and timings. Next time you see your opponent using those buttons, respond with the stuff that worked when you labbed it. If there was a string that didn't seem to end and you got killed trying to mash out of it, set the training dummy to all guard, record yourself doing the string, and then look for ways to FD the string to get stuff to whiff, or IB parts of the string to create gaps, or check the frame data on all the moves to see if there was a gap you weren't aware of and try contesting it with a normal that fits in the gap. Next time you see your opponent coming in with a block string, try one of the things that worked when you labbed it. If there were mix-ups that you didn't know how to defend against, record yourself doing the mix-up you got hit by in slot 1, and the other possible options you see from that situation in slots 2 and 3, and go through them all one at a time to see what your answers are. Then, set the dummy to random and check to see if you can actually react to all of the different options, or see if any of your answers work against multiple options, which is ideal. Next time they come in for that mix-up, choose the option that seemed the most effective or reliable and see if it works. If you were going for a knockdown setup of your own and you were caught by a wake-up throw or a DP or something else, then your setup likely needs some tuning. Exerd's built-in training mode tools aren't great for this, but on PC there's a third-party wake-up tool that you can use to get the dummy to perform whatever input you want after getting knocked down. So you can test your setup's timing to see what you need to do to avoid getting thrown or hit by an invincible reversal. The next time you run into those buttons, strings, or mix-ups, you might still get hit and you might still lose, but at least you won't be losing because you didn't know what you could have done instead. And that means that you're playing the real game instead of just getting knowledge checked. The next time you run into it, you'll be a little more ready. So don't worry, labbing stuff not immediately applying to matches is true for most players during the vast majority of your journey, and the gap from "I labbed this" to "I can do this in a real match" goes down over time. Now, because I am a very experienced fighting game player, I can read your mind right now. You're wondering, but how can I lab against another character's stuff if I don't know how to play that character? And the strongest answer is, once again, training mode. If you're serious enough about a game to play it competitively and you want to get better at it, then it is generally to your benefit to treat the entirety of the game as something worth learning how to play and not just your preferred character. Do I know how to play every character at a competitive level in Rev 2 or any of the other games I play? Oh, hell no. There are a lot of characters and I play a lot of games, and I only have so much time to play. Fortunately, there is another convenient search strategy for this, and it's the same one we just used. You lab what you lose to. At first, it'll feel like a lot of work just to learn your way around another character well enough to do a mix-up. It'll feel uncomfortable, not feeling as fluid and competent as you are with your main. But the more you do it, the easier it gets, and the more you'll begin to understand that while the game seems to have an impossibly vast number of situations, they're not all unique, and you can often find solutions that apply across a lot of them. And if you understand how the character works, it's easier to understand what the opponent who is playing that character is thinking. This is where many players' investment in their game falls off. They like playing their character, but aren't willing to learn how to play others in order to level up their understanding of the game. If you decide that's where you draw the line, you certainly aren't alone. But unless you have an extensive set of homies who are willing to run you through all the Oki in the world so you don't have to do it yourself, it'll end up holding you back eventually, since you won't be able to figure out the answers to any given situation all on your own. Frankly, fighting games are way more fun when you can play more characters than they are when you can only play one. And as a side perk, you'll get to know other characters so well that you can help newer players pick them up too. I don't know how to play every character at a high level, but my jam has been good enough to win a couple brackets here or there, and I won our Face Your Demons bracket with my Slayer. I'll often play the mirror match with new players to help them understand the basics of what makes their character good. You're here to play fighting games, so play the whole game you paid for. It's also worth pointing out that since I originally wrote this essay, Exerd received a replay takeover mod that lets you lab the specific situation from a specific replay that you were playing through. So it's even easier to practice against the stuff that you lost to because you can just play through the replay again and try different options. However, I maintain it's still a good idea to learn how to do the stuff yourself, but if you really don't want to, just grab the replay takeover mod. Now let's get to the next question. But why am I even doing this when someone else could find a better way? This is also a great question. The fact is, in a game as old as Rev 2, someone else probably has found a better way, and if you scour the match footage over at Replay Theater, you might be able to find it. Watching replays of better players and copying their solutions is a pretty excellent search strategy that will save you a lot of time noodling around in training mode, which is why I highly recommend it. To this day, I'm still baffled by people asking how do I play Chip in Rev 2, because my answer is simple. You watch Summit's videos and you do what he does. As someone who started playing Chip in XX well before streaming video on the internet was a thing, a lot of my fundamental Exerd practice consisted mostly of watching Summit videos, copying things bit by bit, and asking bears what was going on in a video when I didn't understand it. Does my Chip look exactly like Summit's does? Of course not. I am not Summit. We are different people with different brains and hands and experiences. I've played a lot of Rev 2, but I haven't played against all the people he's played against, nor do I have the depth of experience that he has. There is stuff he does that I didn't understand until I started playing Chip in Plus R and realized that he'd probably learned a certain setup or combo in a previous game and just did it because in Exerd, it still worked, even if it wasn't the best option. There are times where I'd look at a bizarre choice in a mix-up, wonder why he did it, and then realize when going for the mix-up myself that he actually just had an execution error that happened to work out. Through playing the game and doing my best Summit impression, I got some decent combos, functional set play, and the worst burst timing ever. And then, I wanted to learn how to move around the screen with a bit more freedom, so I started watching ET videos. While he's not as competitively successful as Summit was in Rev 2, he moves around the screen like a motherfucking ninja, so I'd get some ideas from him, and so on, and so on. Over time, I find myself with a Chip that is a little bit of everyone else, a little bit of no one else, and 100% mine. In fighting games, you win or you lose. The game doesn't care if you won using your very own handcrafted option select or someone else's. The only value you get directly from doing your own stuff is the satisfaction you get from it. If you're trying to be efficient with your time, studying the way that stronger players play and learning from their solutions is really, really effective, in the same way that studying math in a class with a teacher in a textbook is more effective than trying to figure it out for yourself. All you have to do is watch the matchup, see what they do when they're in the situation that you're in, write it down, and try it for yourself. However, this is a game, not a job or math class. And you probably aren't playing this game because you want to be a streamlined efficiency monster. Some people like to lab their own answers because the fun part of playing video games for them is problem solving, and the process of figuring stuff out and deepening their understanding of how the game works is itself fun. Others do it because they want to feel like the way they play their character is unique to them, even if it means choosing stuff that might not be as effective. And then there are the folks who see the answer that a good player chooses and thinks, well, I can't do that, so let me find something else that I can do. These are all valid ways to play fighting games, and while they can be inefficient and suboptimal, they're still quite valuable. At Combo Breaker a couple years ago, I got to get Hotashi to dust off his Exerd Elfelt and play a few games of casuals. While we played, I mentioned that I have a much greater appreciation for his skill with Elfelt, and specifically his extremely consistent combo routing and execution from a wide variety of situations I had never seen before. And he replied with, I wanted to make my play look unique, and I had to learn a lot of interesting stuff to do so. The way you play Guilty Gear is an amalgamation of the outcomes of every decision you've made along the way. It's whether you autopilot the menu screen to network or versus or training mode. It's whether you learn one character or all of them. It's whether you spend your spare time watching videos or labbing or sparring or dreaming or playing something else. It's whether you ask for help from more experienced players or not. As I mentioned in How Do I Develop My Own Playstyle, sometimes your style will involve practicing to do the thing until you're good at it, and sometimes your style will involve finding ways to avoid doing the thing you can't or don't want to do. So with that, let's get back to the original question. How do I figure out my own way of using training mode? And the answer is, as it is with just about everything else in Guilty Gear, it depends. You have a tool, and it's up to you to learn how to use it. I've given you some concrete tips so far that I'll recap here. Lab what you lose to, learn to play other characters, use the record and playback functions to recreate string setups or neutral situations you want to solve on your own. Use the random playback function to test your ability to react to branching situations and find solutions that cover multiple situations. Use matchup footage from Replay Theater to research situations you want to see how others have solved. Ask more experienced players for help. Ask your friends to help you practice. And grab the Rev 2 Wake Up tool and Replay Takeover mod to practice your setups against Wake Up DP and throw and mashing, etc. You have all these tools available, just like every other Rev 2 player. How you use these tools is ultimately up to you and is reflective of how you choose to practice and learn. For what it's worth, I don't think you needed me to tell you that if you wanted to practice against the setup, you're going to have to learn to do it yourself. But you might have needed me to tell you that if you want to learn how to play this game, it starts by actually learning how to play the whole ass game, including the characters you don't main, and features with obtuse UX, like record and playback. If you're up for that, great. And if not, you'll have to find your own way. But the reason that it's Rev 2 for Rev 2 and not Rev 2 until the next game is because I believe that it's honestly a forever game. And since you're only 7 months into your journey, I'd suggest not to worry about it too much. Just keep playing, do the stuff I mentioned above when you feel up to it, and enjoy the ride. Forever is a long time, and we've got a hell of a lot of Rev 2 to work our way through. Thanks for listening.